Welcome back, folks. So in this video we are going to be going back to Star Wars, and we're going to be doing a 2-for-1 in this deal. We're going to be doing two little Jawas. It comes as part of the same file from Star Wars 3D, and you can see I printed them. So this guy I printed in one whole piece, apart from the head. The head has to be printed separately. For the second Jawa, what I actually realised was that you didn't need to print him with his hands and his feet. There was an option of just doing the body. As I say, the head was again a separate option. So that's what I did this time round. So his 2 feet are separate, as is his gun. So that slots into there like so. So everything has been primed black, as you can see. Black is a colour that I don't normally use on figures, but given that this guy has got obviously a lot of shadows in the recesses, he obviously has got a black face anyway, and he's just essentially going to be a majority of browns, it makes sense to do it black. Now, they do come with a base. The base is a kind of a hexagonal base. The problem I have with that is they've made a bit of a mistake in my mind. They have essentially put the Imperial cog logo on the centre, which doesn't make an awful lot of sense given these guys are a couple of Jawas. They're certainly not stormtroopers. And also, it kind of limits your options a little bit if you use one large base, because you have to essentially pose them how, that base would allow you to do it. So I've come up with my own design. Effectively what I've done is I've used a very simple base from models I've used before in the past. I think I got this from Galactic Armory. They essentially have the same base every time you buy one of their models, but I've resized it, so I've got one slightly smaller than the other, and I made sure to do it that obviously this one, the bigger one, will fit the bigger guy, and the smaller one, the smaller guy. So obviously I'm going to have to do some rework here because these peg holes don't match the peg holes for the figures. So what I'm going to do is, first thing I'm going to do actually is cut off these pegs. Then I'm going to position them. Then I'm going to do something different on the base. I'm going to do essentially cover it in glue, cover it in sand to make a nice desert base for both of them. So let's get cracking with that. So after that little bit of modelling, I am now finished with the bases. I will obviously come back and paint the tops of them as I do the painting process, but for now they're good to go. I use the cut down nails as pegs and they fit rather well. So all things are going according to plan so far, so let's crack on with the painting. So the first thing I'm going to start with is the largest area, which is obviously the cloaks. I wanted to have the two guys to have slight different colour variation, nothing too mad, a little bit subtle, just so they're not exactly identical. So for the taller of the two fellas, I'm going to go with Gorgon Brown, and then for the shorter fella, I'm going to go for Mornfang Brown. So this is just going to take a little while, just a case of covering all the cloaks, trying not to Well, it doesn't really matter actually at this stage whether I hit the sort of the face or not, because we're going to come back and tidy all that up anyway. Okay, so with that first colour of brown laid down, it's now time to do a dry brush over the top of that. I'm going to use Parasite Brown for both of the Jawas. Now, anyone who hasn't done a dry brush before, you simply take some of the paint onto your brush. You want to brush with fairly good, nice stiff bristles. You want to get most of it off either on a paper towel or one of these textured wooden boards. Get it to a point where it's not leaving too much paint behind. Just test that on your thumb, and then a case of just running it over the model. So I'm going to do an all over dry brush of this colour, but I'm going to probably do it a little bit heavier where I see some of the folds. So for example, along here, really sort of bring out that texture. So it's lighter on the top layer and obviously darker in the recesses. Using some sandry dust, I'm now using a slightly smaller dry brush, but you don't have to be overly neat with this. I'm just going to use this colour to essentially bring detail to the frayed parts at the end of the skirt and also around the collars or cuffs. Now when you look at reference material of the Jawas, particularly those from A New Hope, you can see that they're actually really quite dusty. They've got a lot of, I guess, sand covered all over them. So I'm just going to attempt to do a little bit of that. So what I'm going to do is take some more cast bone, take a smaller dry brush, and I'm just going to sort of pick the odd area here and there where to me it makes a bit of sense. I might have a bit more dust. So I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but just pick out a few spots here and there. Let's go with one on the head, just to give it a bit more of a dusty desert look. Next up, I'm going to use some leather brown, and this is going to be for the under suit, I guess, whatever the garb is he's got underneath the main cloak. Then across that is a wash of Seraphim sepia. Now for all the pouches and belts that go around the chests, I'm going to use some Rhinox hide, which is a nice dark brown. And then across those pouches is a dry brush using some Mournfang brown. And then using some Baylor brown, it's a final dry brush. I say dry brush, kind of dry brush and a little bit of sort of stippling, just to create a little bit of difference in texture here and there. Then we're going to finish off the pouches by adding some little bit of gunmetal just to the metal fasteners. Now for the hands holding the gun, I'm going to start painting the stock, and I'm going to use Rhinox hide, which is a very dark brown. Next up is some gunmetal silver, and this is for all of the metal part of the gun. Then I'm going to take some Nuln oil and throw this black wash all over the silver parts. Next up, I'm taking some Riser Rust, which is a nice bright orange, and I'm going to do a dry brush across all the metallic parts just to make it look a little bit rusty. Then I'm going to take some Mournfang brown and do a little dry brush over the wooden stock. For the feet of each Jawa, I'm going to use Rhinox hide to start with. This is just going to be an all-over coat. Followed by a dry brush using Mornfang brown, so a slightly lighter brown. I'm going to follow that up with another dry brush, this time using Steel Legion Drab, and just a slightly less heavy dry brush this time around, just to catch a few of the corners and edges. And then finally I'm just going to paint the soles black. Okay, so it's time to tackle the face and hands. Now I've gone back in and I've tidied all the black up, because obviously with all the painting I've done so far I was bound to get a little bit of overspray, especially with all the dry brushing. Now it's a funny one this, because obviously Jawas faces, you don't see anything apart from their eyes. You don't want to see too much detail. I mean, there is actually sort of bandages that have been painted on, same as the hands. So I want to keep them black, but I want to keep a little bit of interest there as well. So I've decided to do a dry brush using the darkest grey I've got. So I'm going to use some of this warm grey from Pro Acryl, and I think this should give me, it'll bring out the detail but still look like it's black. Because if you go too light with it, I think you're going to change the overall effect and it might just be too light. So I think that's probably how I'm going to go. I don't know how well that's being picked up on the camera, but it is making a difference. It's bringing out like the hair on the hands. And the tricky one is going to be the face, because again, you want the face to be black. You don't want to sort of turn it to grey. So it's knowing when to stop, I think. I did think about doing it a dark brown, but I don't think that would have worked, to be honest. I think I prefer this look. Okay, so we're on the home stretch now, just the eyes to finish. So to start with, I'm going to put a coat of bold titanium white over each one. So this will just make it easier for the yellow to show. So obviously painting yellow straight on black would not be easy. Next up, I'm going to take some Uriel yellow, which is a nice shady yellow. It's got a slight orange tint to it. And we're going to just cover these eyes now. Hopefully I can do it in one coat, but it might have to be two. Okay, so for the next step, I'm going to take some Cassandra yellow, and I'm just going to run a shade over those eyes. Now the idea for this is I just want a little bit of a darker recess as it pulls away from the centre of the eyes. Now if I've put too much on, I can just dry my brush a bit and take some of that off. Turning now to the base, I'm going to start with some Sandry Dust, which is a nice sandy colour. Now that has had time to dry, I'm going to do a couple of washes over this. I'm going to do Seraphim Sepia and some Agrax Earthshade. And what I'm going to do is just a bit of each colour in sort of random spots really. So just to try and break it up a little bit. So a little bit here, a little bit there. And then I'll jump to the brown wash as well. You can see obviously it's much darker colour there. Let's take a little while to dry, but just make sure that I cover the whole base. Next up is a dry brush using some Moorcast Bone. This will produce a nice lighter sand colour. And after that dry brushing, this is the final result for the two bases. So I'm pretty happy with those. So that's everything done now. So let me put the models together and I will come back and show you the final result. But unfortunately the weather isn't playing ball today, so we're under the spotlights. But nevertheless, I think you can get the idea of how they look, the two finished painted guys, and I'm really pleased with them. I'm glad that you got two with the model. I think that having just one on its own certainly doesn't have the impact. I like the fact that they're two different heights. I like the fact that, you know, one is loaded up with a gun, the other one is, I guess, pointing at C-3PO or R2, perhaps he's spotted over the dunes, something like that. I think I made the right call to do slightly different colour browns for both of them. It just adds a little bit of difference. As I say, it's nothing hugely noticeable, but it just gives a little bit of different characterisation to each one. Now, what I will just say is one detail that I noticed when painting, which you wouldn't otherwise notice, is the actual textures of the cloaks are different to each other. So this one's got like a checkered texture running through it, and this one is much more just sort of straightforward, like a woven sort of pattern. So yeah, they're actually not even sculpted exactly in the same way as each other, which is a nice touch. I'm glad that I did actually change the bases, because I think having those two smaller bases gives you much more options on how you want to display and which way round you might want them to go. And also just makes it slightly smaller if you do want to break them up, depending how you display them. So I highly recommend you check these guys out if you are a fan of Star Wars, or if you're a fan of little guys in brown cloaks, if nothing else. They're nice and simple models to paint. Dry brushing is definitely your best friend on this one. So from that point of view, I think it's quite easy to achieve a really nice professional look. So I now need to work out where exactly I'm going to display these two guys. Space is starting to become a real issue at the moment, but nevertheless, I'm sure I will find somewhere. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the video, then please consider subscribing and also giving a like or a comment, as I'm told that helps the algorithm. I don't really know if that's true, but it's what people say. But in any event, I hope you'll join me for the next video where we will carry on doing lots more painting. Take care everyone, and I will see you soon.